What would you do if the only mother you have ever known looked at you one evening and told she wasn't the one who gave you life? Emma had never imagined she would have to answer that question. For 37 years, she had moved through her days believing the story she was told. Ruth was her mother. The small house on the edge of town was her home. The love she received, though quiet and often worn thin by hardship, had always felt real. She never questioned where she came from because the woman who raised her never gave her a reason to, until the night Ruth decided she could no longer keep the truth to herself. It began like any other evening. Emma had come over after work, the way she always did now that Ruth's health had started to slip. She made tea, the same way Ruth had taught her. She sat in the old wooden chair beside the bed and listened to the familiar sounds of the house settling for the night. Ruth's breathing was slower these days, and her hands trembled more when she held the cup. Emma had grown used to the quiet rhythm of caring for her, but that night, Ruth did not drink her tea. She set the cup down on the small table and turned to look at her daughter. Her eyes were tired, but there was something else in them. A weight Emma had never seen before. "There's something I need to tell you," Ruth said. Her voice was low, almost careful. "Something I should have told you a long time ago." Emma felt a strange stillness settle over the room. She waited. Ruth took a slow breath. "You were not born to me." The words hung in the air between them. For a moment, Emma could not understand what she had just heard. She thought perhaps she had misheard, or that Ruth was confused. But the look on her mother's face told her this was not confusion. This was something Ruth had carried for a very long time. Ruth continued, her voice steady but quiet. 37 years earlier, during a time when life was uncertain and many people were struggling to survive, she had gone to a hospital in the city. While she was there, she learned of a young woman who had just given birth. The woman had already suffered greatly. She had lost the use of one arm in a terrible accident years before, and she knew she could not give the child the life she deserved. With almost no one to turn to, she made the painful decision to let her baby go. Ruth had stood nearby that day, carrying her own private grief. Her husband had passed away not long before, leaving her with children to raise and very little to raise them on. Yet when she saw the newborn girl, something inside her shifted. She could not explain it then, and she still could not explain it fully now. She only knew she could not walk away. With the help of her brother Paul, and in complete secrecy, she took the baby home and raised her as her own. No one else knew, not her neighbors, not the rest of her family, not even the man she had once called her husband. For 37 years, Ruth had kept the truth buried so deeply that sometimes she almost convinced herself it had never happened. She raised Emma exactly as she raised her other children, with the same tired hands, the same quiet love, and the same fierce protection. She never wanted Emma to feel different. She never wanted her to carry the weight of being anyone's second choice. But as the years passed and Ruth grew older, the secret began to press harder against her chest. She watched Emma grow into a woman who worked hard, who helped raise her younger siblings, who built a life even when things were difficult. Ruth felt proud. She also felt afraid. She did not want to leave this world with Emma still not knowing where she truly came from. So on that quiet evening, with the light fading outside the window, Ruth finally spoke. Emma sat frozen in the chair. Her mind moved slowly, trying to catch up with what she had just heard. She thought of her childhood. The long nights Ruth stayed up working, the way she made sure Emma had what she needed for school even when money was tight, the tired but steady way she had held the family together after her husband died. All of it had felt like love. Real love. Now Emma was being told that love had begun with a secret. She wanted to ask questions, but her throat felt tight. She wanted to be angry, but she could not find the anger. All she could feel was a deep, aching confusion. The woman sitting in front of her was still the only mother she had ever known, and yet everything had changed. Ruth reached out and placed her hand over Emma's. Her fingers were thin and cool. "I'm not telling you this to hurt you," she said. "I'm telling you because I'm getting older, and I don't know how much time I have left. You deserve to know where you came from, and if you want to find them, I won't stop you." Emma looked at her mother's hand resting on top of hers, the same hand that had fed her, bathed her, and wiped her tears for 37 years. She felt something shift inside her chest. Not quite pain, not quite relief, but something in between. A door had been opened that could never be closed again. That night, after Ruth had fallen asleep, Emma stepped outside into the cool air. She stood on the small porch and looked out at the dark hills. Her entire life felt like it had been rewritten in the space of one conversation. She thought about the woman who had given birth to her, a woman who had already lost so much and then had to let go of one more thing. She thought about Ruth, who had stepped into that empty space without ever asking for anything in return. For the first time in her life, Emma did not know who she was supposed to be. She went back inside, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at the old wooden surface. After a long time, she picked up her phone. Her hands were shaking slightly as she opened a message to someone she trusted. Someone who sometimes helped people find pieces of their past. She began to type. She wrote about the hospital, about the woman who had lost an arm, about the mother who had raised her in silence for 37 years. She did not use names. She simply told the truth as she now understood it. She read the message several times before she sent it. Then she put the phone down and sat in the dark, waiting for a reply she was not sure she was ready to receive. What she did not know was that somewhere, someone was already reading her words. The reply came faster than Emma expected. The next morning, while she was still sitting at the kitchen table with a cold cup of tea in front of her, her phone lit up. The message was from a woman named Clara. She wrote that she believed she might be looking for the same person. She asked gentle questions about the year, the hospital, and the woman who had lost an arm. When Emma answered, the details matched in ways that made her chest feel tight. Over the next few days, they exchanged more messages. Clara sent a photograph. It was an old picture of a young woman with kind eyes and a quiet smile. Emma stared at it for a long time. There was something in the shape of the face that felt strangely familiar, like a memory she had never lived. She saved the photo but did not show it to Ruth yet. She needed time to understand what was happening. When she finally gathered the courage to tell Ruth, she expected silence or pain. Instead, Ruth listened without interrupting. She sat in her chair by the window, her hands folded in her lap, and let Emma speak. When Emma finished, Ruth was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "If this is what you need, then you should keep going. I won't stand in your way." Emma had prepared herself for many reactions, but not this one. She had been ready for Ruth to feel hurt or afraid. She had not been ready for permission. It made everything feel both lighter and heavier at the same time. Still, Emma moved slowly. She spoke with Clara a few more times. Each conversation revealed a little more. Clara told her that the woman in the photograph was named Lila. She had worked selling tea on the trains after her accident. She had carried the secret of her child until the very end of her life. Clara said the family had lived with the quiet ache of not knowing for decades. Now that they had found Emma, they wanted to know she had been loved. One evening, Emma sat beside Ruth's bed and told her what she had learned. Ruth listened the same way she always had, quietly, with her full attention. When Emma mentioned that Lila had passed away years ago, Ruth closed her eyes for a moment. She did not speak, but Emma saw something shift in her face. It was not sadness exactly. It was something closer to understanding. A few days later, something unexpected happened. Uncle Paul came to the house. He had always been the quiet one in the family, the one who helped Ruth in silence all those years ago, and then never spoke of it again. He sat at the kitchen table with Emma and Ruth, drank his tea slowly, and then said something that surprised them both. "I always thought this day might come," he said, "and I think it's right that it did." Emma looked at him. Paul had never been one to share his feelings easily. He continued, "Your mother did something brave back then. She gave you a life when someone else couldn't. But that doesn't mean you don't have the right to know where you started. I don't want you to feel like you're betraying anyone by asking questions." Ruth did not argue. She simply nodded. Emma felt something loosen inside her chest. For the first time since Ruth had told her the truth, she felt like she was not completely alone in this. As the days passed, the conversations with Clara grew longer. Emma learned more about Lila, how she had struggled, how she had tried to keep going even after losing her arm, and how she had made the hardest decision of her life in that hospital. Hearing these things did not make Emma feel less connected to Ruth. If anything, it made her understand more deeply what Ruth had done. Two women had loved her in different ways, and both had carried heavy silence because of it. One afternoon, Clara asked if Emma would be willing to meet. Not right away, but soon. She said the family wanted to see her, even if only once. They also wanted to thank Ruth if she would allow it. Emma told them she needed time to think. She did not want to rush anything, especially not while Ruth's health remained uncertain. That night, Emma sat with Ruth again. She told her about the invitation. Ruth was quiet for a while, but only if you want to. Don't do it because you think you owe it to anyone. Emma nodded. But inside, the conflict was growing. She wanted to meet them. She wanted to see the faces of the people who had lived with the same unanswered questions she now carried. At the same time, every time she looked at Ruth, she felt the pull to stay close. Ruth had given her everything. How could she leave, even for a short time, when Ruth was growing weaker? A few days later, Clara sent another message. The family had spoken among themselves and decided they wanted to do things properly. They suggested arranging a DNA test, not because they doubted, but because they wanted everything to be clear before any meeting. They said it would give everyone peace of mind, especially Ruth. Emma read the message twice. A DNA test felt like a door she could not close once she opened it. She showed the message to Ruth. Her mother read it slowly, then handed the phone back. "Do what you need to do," Ruth said. "I'm not afraid of the truth anymore." Emma felt her throat tighten. She had expected Ruth to hesitate or worry. Instead, she had given her blessing again. It should have made things easier, but somehow it made the decision feel even more important. Over the next week, arrangements were made. Clara helped organize everything. A test kit would be sent. Once the results came back, they could decide on a meeting. Emma felt both nervous and strangely calm. For the first time since this all began, she felt like she was moving forward instead of standing still in confusion. But just as things seemed to be falling into place, Ruth had a difficult night. Her breathing became shallow, and she grew confused for a few hours. Emma stayed by her side until morning, holding her hand and speaking softly. When Ruth finally settled into sleep, Emma sat in the chair beside the bed and stared at the dark window. She thought about the test kit that would arrive soon. She thought about the family waiting on the other side of this journey. She thought about Ruth, who had carried this secret alone for so long, and was now watching her walk toward the very thing she had hidden. Emma realized then that the hardest part was not finding the truth. The hardest part was learning how to hold both truths at the same time. The mother who raised her and the mother who gave her life. She did not know yet how to do that, and she was no longer sure how much time she had left to figure it out. The results arrived on a rainy morning. Emma opened the envelope with steady hands, though her heart was beating hard. The test confirmed what they already believed. She carried the paper into Ruth's room and placed it on the bedside table without speaking. Ruth looked at it for a long time. Then she gave a small nod, the same quiet nod she had given when Emma first told her the truth. That was all. They met on a quiet afternoon in a small town between their homes. Clara was there, along with two of Lila's brothers and an older aunt. They gathered in a simple room with a wooden table and large windows. No one tried to fill the silence with too many words. Tea was poured. The stories came slowly. Clara spoke first. She told Emma how Lila had worked on the trains after losing her arm, how she had carried the secret of her child until her last days. One of the brothers said Lila had asked about the baby only once near the end, then let the question go because she believed the child was safe. The aunt added that Lila had been gentle, even when life had not been. They spoke of her without drama, the way people speak of someone they have carried in their hearts for a long time. Emma listened. She noticed how Clara's hands moved when she poured the tea, careful, almost the same way Ruth had always done it. She noticed how one of the brothers held his shoulders when he spoke, the same quiet strength she had seen in Ruth on difficult days. Nothing dramatic happened in that room. No one wept loudly. Yet something old and unfinished seemed to settle. Before they left, Clara placed a small bundle wrapped in faded cloth into Emma's hands. Inside was an old photograph of Lila and a thin silver chain with a tiny leaf charm. "This was hers," Clara said. "We want you to have it." Emma closed her fingers around the bundle. She did not open it there. On the way home, she kept the bundle on her lap. The rain had stopped, but the roads were still wet. When she reached the small house, the lights were already low. Ruth was sitting in her chair by the window, a shawl across her shoulders. Emma walked in quietly, set her bag down, and crossed the room. She placed the bundle on the table beside Ruth's chair. Then she knelt, took the edge of the shawl, and tucked it more closely around her mother's shoulders, the same way Ruth had once tucked blankets around her when she was small. Ruth looked down at her. Her eyes were tired but clear. She reached out and rested her hand lightly on Emma's head, the same way she had done when Emma was a girl. Neither of them spoke. The room held only the sound of the clock and the soft settling of the old house. In the weeks that followed, Emma stayed close. She cooked the meals Ruth liked. She sat with her in the evenings and sometimes shared one small thing she had learned. Ruth listened. Once, after Emma finished speaking, Ruth said only, "I'm glad you went," that was all. It was enough. Mess came from Clara and the others. They asked after Ruth's health. They sent photographs of gatherings Emma had never known existed. Emma answered when she could. She never felt she had to choose between the two. The love that had raised her was still the one she returned to every evening. One night, as she helped Ruth into bed, Ruth caught her hand and held it longer than usual. She looked at Emma and said, very softly, "You were always mine." Then she closed her eyes and slept. Emma stood beside the bed for a while after turning off the lamp. She listened to Ruth's breathing, steady and familiar. Outside, the wind moved through the trees. Inside, the small house held everything she had searched for and everything she had never needed to leave. She thought of the woman who had given her life and the woman who had given her a life worth living. Both had loved her in the only way they knew how. Both had let her go when the time came for her to know more. She pulled the chair closer to the bed and sat down. Her hand rested near Ruth's on the blanket. She did not move for a long time. The night deepened around them. Somewhere far away, another family carried pieces of the same story. Here, in this room, the story had come full circle and found its place to rest. Has someone ever loved you so quietly and completely that you only understood the depth of it years later? If they are still here, have you told them what that meant?